It's so nice. Ooh, recording in progress. Okay, continue. Um, yes, so it's so nice to see everyone. I was just going through I need glasses for that. Going through the screen here, and so good to see everyone. Oh, some family too. That's great. Oh no, family. Oh. Anyway, um, so it really is an honor for me to be sharing some of these wonderful little, well, information, some theories, some tools that not only I have picked up um, in my personal life, but also my professional life. So um, I would say I'm not a marriage expert because I'm also a work in progress. My husband and I are. So we're here to learn from each other. So I might ask you to I might ask some questions and you can take yourself off mute to answer them from time to time. Um, and also just a little note, will also be mentioning some bonus resources that I would like to offer to share with you. And Amanda will be putting those on the chat so that you can download them and print them or whatever you would like to do with them. Um, and I also want you to know that most of these concepts that we're going to be talking about today, it's going to be a bit of an eclectic kind of mix. But the bulk is from the Family Life. So it's called Family Life Canada. Their virtual workshop that we purchased, or I purchased, and I'm able to use it on an unlimited basis. So it's all legal, I guess. And one of the things that they mentioned in their workshop is that 1 out of 5 couples, 1 out of 5 couples ever does anything intentional to invest in their marriage. And that includes a class or a seminar like this, even reading an article or a book. 1 in 5. That's not a lot. But fortunately, you are included in that elite group of people who care about the health of their marriage. So turn to your partner right now, if they're present, and I don't know, give them a hug or a kiss or a high five or whatever, and say, thank you for investing in our relationship this afternoon. It really means a lot to me. So cute. So what we have in common this afternoon is that we really do care about our marriages. To take time on a Saturday afternoon. Well, it was raining, so it's not so bad. But beyond that, we might even be very different right now. I mean, I see a number of couples here that are different in terms of their where they are in their marriage. How long they've been married. If they've been married more than once, are they in a step family situation? Maybe they're thinking of getting married. So there's so many differences here, and some are, let's be honest, some are in a good place in their marriage, and some are in maybe a difficult season. So we're different. We're going to be in different places. We may even be in maybe in a different place spiritually. I mean, I don't know exactly if there's anyone that is not an SDA member. I didn't look at everyone, but maybe you're in a place where you may be tentative about your beliefs. So, but I just want you to know that I'm going to be coming from a Christian perspective, and I'm going to talk about, what I believe to be true about God's design for marriage, what works best, and that it works best when He's in it. So So just keep an open mind as we move forward. Um, you know, when I work with couples, I like to tell them that they're going to get out of the counseling experience what they put in. So this is also true for today. So being very being engaged and maybe then later on having conversations with our partner about things that we learned today, you know, would probably be helpful for you. So so the workshop, as you know, is called Together for Good, and if you want to take notes on your in your workbook, you can do that. Follow along. There are going to be some exercises, like we mentioned before, where I'm going to ask you to take some time, usually about 3 to 4 minutes. Take some time to do these exercises with your partner, um, um, if they're there, and then we'll come back together. Okay, so let's get started. There are 4 different ways in which um, couples can stay together for good, right? So, first of all, we want you to stay together. It's not working. Okay, we want you to stay together for good, right? That means for the rest of your life, forever, in a manner of speaking, because that's what the plan of marriage is, what God's plan for marriage is. Now, you know, we know that not every marriage can go the distance or goes the distance, and we'll talk about some of the reasons a little bit later. But we can all agree now that hopefully we can all agree now that we will live out the commitment we made until death do us part. We remember that commitment, right? That we would be together for good. So is that a good commitment to make? Yes, yes, awesome. Um, the second one is that we would be together for our good, for the good of the two of you, right? Um, uh, all we need is to look around us, right? We can just look around and see that there's so many forces in our culture downgrading marriages and diminishing its value and its importance. It's often painted as like a death sentence, right? I mean, you could, there's so many sayings about that. Um, that when you get married, everything changes, it all ends. And there are jokes, people make jokes about it. But sometimes we ourselves use that kind of language in jest, but we still use it. It's the end of freedom. It's the end of fun. It's the end of great sex. You've heard all of that, right? So this kind of mindset and these ideas spread and spreads, you know, in our, not only in our society, but even sometimes in our own homes. And we really need to be very mindful about the kind of language that we use. So so sorry. Yeah. Um, so we really want to stand against these messages. We as a community, as a church, can stand against these messages and tell ourselves that it's not true. Tell our children that it's not true. The reality is, and it's empirically true, that marriage or people that are married are happier, right? We live longer, we're healthier, we're wealthier, and we have more sex. Yay, believe it or not. And I know that it doesn't always feel that way. But empirically speaking, research tells us that married couples are generally happier across the board than our single or cohabitating counterparts. So this tells us that it's good for us to be married, right? So the next one, we also want to say that that we want to be together for others' good, right? You know, When marriages stay together, it's a really, really good thing for a whole lot of people. It's good for our communities. There's such a strain on our community services and schools. So when we stay together for others, that strain is decreased. It's good for a country, for our own country, because when marriages fall apart, it costs billions and billions of dollars in economic impact. So staying together is really good, for also for our kids, right? There's a mountain of data, and it's pretty consistent that children from intact homes have less trouble with the law. They stay in school longer, they achieve higher, they engage in less high risk behaviors, there are less teen pregnancies, and so on and so on and so on. So an intact home is really good for kids all around. I can't tell you the number of kids I see in my office, hurting kids as a result of a divorce, their parents' divorce. They're put in the middle of two bitter people, even after they've separated. So staying together is really good for the kids. You know, sometimes you get people saying, um, uh, and I've heard this many times, that you know, isn't it better that we don't stay together, if we're always fighting? Do you mean that we should stay together for the sake of the kids? And it's a tough question to answer because there's so many circumstances at play. But in general, the answer is yes. Staying together for the sake of the kids is actually a very good reason. There's an author, his name is Ron Deal. He writes a lot of step parenting books. Um, and he says the same thing, that while kids are better off in a home without fighting and contempt, the solution that he has is quite simple. Well, don't fight. Stop fighting, right? Like, don't do it. So, you know, it's not that simple. I realize that. And when you have problems in your marriage, the answer to solve those problems just isn't to break the home, right? You need to be really, really honest about the issues and our ability to fix them on our own. You know, working on them through this workshop, going to therapy, or seeking out mentoring is really worth it, because marriages that stay together for good are really good for other people, right? Especially our children. And one more, the fourth one is, staying together is good for God's good, right? If you think in these terms, it can be dramatically restorative. It can change the way you think about marriage and about your marriage in particular. When we consider that marriage was designed with a purpose, some of that purpose is the relationship, the marriage relationship itself. Our relationship with our spouse has the potential of experiencing the kind of unconditional, grace filled, sacrificial kind of love that is pretty much the exact picture of how God loves his children, his people, his church, right? You know, we see this imagery used all throughout scripture. And if we just let that sink in, the sky's the limit for our marriage. Heaven's the limit for our marriage, because how we do marriage honors God. It glorifies him. It pleases him. It reflects who he is. And that really makes us think and behave more intentionally in our marriage. And that's really, really, like I said, transformative. So marriage is a good thing. It's a good thing for us. It's a good thing for our culture. It's a good thing for our world, our community, our society, our kids. If we have them, it's even good for God. So let's just move right along. And if these are all good reasons for marriage, then why is it so hard sometimes? Why does it feel not so good? Why does it hurt so much sometimes? Many of us have been there. We have felt this way. Why is it so hard? So I just want to, before I move on, just validate that for those couples who are struggling right now and those who have struggled in the past. You're definitely not alone, and there's definitely hope for you, for all of us. So I've been around a lot of marriages. In fact, for some reason, the bulk of my clients are couples. And unfortunately, many of them have some kind of betrayal in their history, recent history, or in the past. I've also worked, as you know, in the family life department for as long as I can remember. And some of the issues of marriage seem to swirl around our differences, and drift in our drift. And these really challenge our marriage relationships. So let's just start talking about the differences. There are so many, and we're not going to have time to talk about them. And we're going to focus on 5 common differences that seem to always show up in marriage. So flip to page 3 and let's just go through them quickly. The first one is gender differences. Pretty obvious, right? You've probably read um, material or watched videos about these differences. Some of them that come up is uh, uh, Mars and Venus, waffles and spaghetti, slow cookers and microwaves, boxes and wires. So all these funny concepts help paint a picture, but they're stereotypical nonetheless, right? So here's actually a funny one that you may have already seen before we get into the differences, by comedian Tim Hawkins.
It will, because women are, that's a hard drink. They're very complicated. Men are easy at Starbucks. You ever go to the drive-thru? Can I help you? Yeah, give me a venti coffee, no cream. Honey, what do you want? Okay, here's what I want. Listen, this is what I want. I want a tall, skinny, sugar-free, decaf, soy, vanilla latte, extra hot, whipped cream, double sleeve, no cup. Please tell me you got that, please. I'd like to change my order to a large whiskey, just a large cup of whiskey, because I'm gonna drive away and off a cliff. I don't want it to hurt so bad.
Yeah, so we are definitely different. But these are stereotypes, and there's definitely still some truth to some of those things. What are some of the stereotypes that you've heard? You can go ahead and take yourself off mute if you want to share with the group. But there's so many out there that we come to believe about the difference between men and women.
The amount of words that women will use in a day versus the amount of concise words that men will use to convey
Ah,
the same message.
right. Anyone else? Well, there's so many out there, right? Men are like this, women are like that, or men should be this way and women should be that way. So, but we really want to be very careful, because if you believe that all men are this way and women are like that, then and you don't happen to kind of fit into that, you can really start to think that maybe there's something wrong or weird about you or abnormal about you. And so we need to be really careful with a stereotypical belief system, and the language. But we do know that we were created male and female with core differences that show up and oftentimes get in the way of our together for good marriage. So let's be mindful of that. And then there are life experiences, number two, that, yeah, let me go here. So life experiences. Um, and partners bring um, all kinds of past experiences into their marriage. All of us bring stuff, right? Different things into our marriage based on our family history, our childhood experiences, our losses. And here's where all this shows up. You know, when some of these experiences in our life have been painful, damaging, like trauma, for example, it can really create some deep, deep wounds. And, you know, the original presenters of this workshop gave the analogy of a landmine. It's like, it's almost like there's a landmine in our relationship and our partner is just walking through it. And all of a sudden, they'll step into uh, um, a part or trigger us. So they'll step into a landmine and it all blows up. And you can think that it's something about the relationship when in fact it's something from the past, something from a previous relationship or our family of origin, where we were hurt or abandoned, rejected, betrayed. Um, and the present conflict is more about than our past, than our marriage. So the truth is that we can't change those life experiences. They're part of who we are. We can't go back and rewrite that history, but we can certainly be aware of these things, noticing how those experiences might be showing up and affecting our current relationship. And it's really important to take some time to heal from those past hurts, which is one way in which we can protect our marriage from past influences. So the number three is personality. We have intrinsic personality differences. There are so many personality differences. We're not going to talk about them all. We're just going to focus on a few that I see come up with a lot of couples. One of the most common ones is an introvert marries an extrovert, right? I don't know. How many of you would say that you've married the opposite? Uh, that's quite a few of you. Yes, I would say so too. So, how many would say, I'm just interested, how many would say you're extroverts? Aha. Okay. And how many are introverts? How many don't know? Or how many are in the middle, you think? Yeah. And sometimes we're in the middle or we're not sure because we're not sure of the actual definition. So, you know, one thing we need to be clear is that one intrinsic personality difference is not better than the other. They're just different. And sometimes we can hold it against our partner when they're not like us, right? So what does it mean to be an introvert, for example, right? Can an introvert actually take themselves off mute and describe what they think an introvert is? No, they can't. Just kidding.
I'll try.
Go ahead.
I'd say it's more energizing to be by yourself. It can be very draining to always be around like larger groups of people. And your hobbies might be ones that are that only need one person, like reading books or um, I don't know, like different, like doing art or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it's not really somebody that doesn't like, never likes people around or is very shy and withdrawn. It's really somebody, like you said, recharges when they're able to have time alone. They need time alone to be themselves, to be healthy and balanced. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? It doesn't mean that you're not social. So for me, for example, I consider myself an introvert. I think I have good social skills most of the time. I like to spend time with people, but I really need a lot of time alone to feel rested and well. So my self-care rituals might involve, going for a walk alone, like you said, reading a book. My husband, on the other hand, Dave's definitely an extrovert. He doesn't think he is, but he is. I know he is. So he recharges by spending time with people. So his self-care might include, playing golf or having a barbecue with his friends or playing team sports or things like that. Yeah, you wouldn't catch me dead doing any of those things. Um, so if you're the type of partner that after a long day of being around people, and at the end of the day, at the end of all that, your inclination is to invite someone over to your house for a meal because people just seem to energize you. But your partner is the one that needs time alone after having been around people all day and looks forward to going home to some peace and quiet. You might really want to talk about this difference and unpack how that looks like for each of you, and definitely respect each other's differences and maybe even set some boundaries around that. So important stuff. If you notice your introverted partner emotionally pushing you away, not there might not even be anything wrong, or he or she may not even be mad at you or anything like that. Just realize that this is just the dynamic for them, right? This is just them being themselves. Just be very self-aware if you are an introvert, especially, and to ask for what you want, for what you need. Maybe it's just a little time to recharge and regroup before you're fully ready to engage with your partner, with your spouse. So really important to build those assertiveness skills, and asking for what you need. Okay. So remember, no one is right or wrong. It's simply an intrinsic personality difference. That's the way we are. And we're going to have to be self-aware and navigate these differences if we're going to understand why there's friction, and then work towards staying together for good, right? So let's talk about one more personality difference. We only have time for, yes, we only have time for this one more. Task oriented people, and then there's relationship oriented people, right? How many of you keep lists and make lists regularly? Oh, yeah. Okay. That's good. And this just kind of um, came to mind, came to my realization when I was putting this thing together. Do you ever put things on your list that you've already done, and it just feels really good? So you add it on your list just so that you can cross it off? No? Has anyone ever done that? Yeah, I do that. It just feels really good to add something I've already done so I can just put a line through it or check mark. I don't know. I didn't realize I was doing that. It was just, part of what I do. But a relationship oriented person looking at what I do, or if you do that, probably thinks it's such a waste of time, right? Um, you would probably be someone who just doesn't understand that, because um, you may be with a relationship oriented person. So for the task oriented person, this would feel really, really good. But the relationship oriented person would have a really hard time understanding this behavior. For them, to-do lists are meant to be thrown out, like, or they don't do them at all. Forget it. Especially if something more uh, fun or more exciting, that's not on the plan for the day, suddenly kind of presents itself. Maybe an invitation for some hanky panky. Who knows? You get my drift. Yeah. So throw away the list. Let's forget what I was supposed to do today. Let's just get to doing that. So, um, but if you're like a really task oriented person, you you simply just can't relax until everything that's on your list, or you can't have fun, right? Until all the tasks are done that are on your list and they're, checked off, right? But the truth is, and this is a danger for us task oriented people, we can really miss out on so many relationship related things in life when we focus on too many tasks and on ticking off our lists. We could be investing in things that are so much more important, like time with our spouse, time with our family, time with friends. So we might be wired to get things done. Um, People will tend to go to us to accomplish things, right? But we have to remember that the relationship is so, so much more important. So how about writing a list today for those task-oriented people? You can write it right now if you want, and you put your spouse on that list for tonight. Check, right? That'd be a good plan. Okay, so these are some of the challenges that or some of the things that challenge couples to stay together for good. So now you have the language for your differences. So whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, or relationally or task oriented, these are good things. Nobody's right or wrong, but sometimes we just kind of rub up against each other and feel the tension, and it feels like almost like sandpaper sometimes, and it challenges our together for good marriage. So number four is we're also different. We have different desires and expectations related to marriage. We bring those expectations and our desires into our relationship. So let's think about where these come from, right? Um, Maybe movies, other relationships we've observed, like our parents. That's a big one. We might decide either one or the other that we want to have exactly the kind of relationship, or parts maybe of it, that we saw in our parents, or we might vow to not do any of the same things that our parents did. So either way, what we take in and observe affects us. Now, here's the thing, okay? So it's healthy to come into marriage with hopes and dreams and desires, but here's where things go awry. Is if those expectations are unrealistic, idealize or romanticize kind of ideas about what our marriage should look like, or our partner should be like. And when it doesn't turn out that way, we often think, maybe he or she is not the one. I made a mistake. This is not going to work. Now, I worked with a couple last year that actually ended up separating because of this idea of not having married the one. She was really hung up on, oh my gosh, maybe I made a mistake. Uh, he's not the one that I was supposed to be with. And worried now that, she's getting to an age where she won't have that opportunity to find the one somewhere out in the world. So that's a really dangerous play or dangerous way of thinking. So, and then there are unspoken or unexpressed expectations. Again, remember that landmine analogy. We can have all these expectations that our partner doesn't even know about. They step into it, they trigger us, and bang, everything explodes. And so we've really never expressed these. So it's really not fair to ask our partner to meet expectations that we've never voiced. Going back to assertiveness, we need to be able to talk to our partner about um, what's in our heart in terms of our expectations, right? So, and then there's those unknown, right? There are things that, we kind of come into our marriage not having those expectations, but then we start to develop them and we have no idea where they came from. Um, has anyone ever noticed that? I think one of the things that I kind of assumed, and I learned quickly that it wasn't going to happen, but I assumed that all guys know how to fix cars, right? And they're like car gurus. But so when I would ask my husband to go and put the sticker on my plate, he was like, well, how do I do that? So, well, that was might have been a silly example, but you know what I mean, right? So when I would say, I think I need to check my oil, can you go and do that for me? Well, take it to the dealer. Come on. So, so that's kind of an expectation I had that I don't know where I got that from, right? So anyway, um, so it could be, maybe from family for a previous relationship or a belief system that you've developed over time. So unrealistic expectations, unspoken expectations, and unknown expectations can really get you into trouble, right? So the last one is it's really common, and it is different family or cultural backgrounds. And this really challenges our capacity to grow together for good. I see this all the time. I'm working with a couple right now that are in complete distress, not because of what's happening directly in their marriage, but what's happening outside of their marriage, family, external influences. So by getting married, you're not just marrying your partner. We know that you end up marrying, the family as well. So for many of us, this is a really scary prospect, and can cause a lot of drift in the marriage. Often these situations are very triggering for people, very distressing. You come from different family backgrounds. Some of you come from different cultural backgrounds, and we all bring our habits and our traditions and our quirks into the relationship, right? So when you have some time, talk to your spouse about what you individually bring to the marriage that has been informed by your background and your culture. If you haven't had that discussion yet, some of the things that often pop up in my counseling room are parenting styles, right? Rituals, like how do we celebrate, certain holidays, partner habits, what your role is in the home, how you handle money, views about sex, even how, believe it or not, how you load the dishwasher. What is the right way and the wrong way of loading the dishwasher based on what my mother said, right? So we all come into our marriage having been taught how things should be, um, through family and culture and whatnot. And these things challenge couples to stay together. But until you negotiate, you're going to continue to run up against these differences and that can cause serious conflict, right? So right now, I'd like to do our first your turn exercise. on page 4, there are 6 statements there. And your task is to read the statement and put a little mark on that, that line, that continuum where you feel you fit. And when you're done, just share your answers with your partner and compare your responses. This is a time just to learn from them. Don't debate it. Don't argue it. Don't spend so much time talking. Just do more listening when it's your partner's turn. And then you can revisit it later. So let's go to page 4, and you've got about 3 to 4 minutes to do that. And so take it away, couples.
You're still on mute, Isabel.
Okay, is that better? Yes, awesome. Okay, so so you see the problem is when you think about, you know, our differences, is we try to eliminate those in our partner, and it rarely is successful, right? Because it's part of who we are. We're wired that way. The problem is that the tools that we use to try to change our partner are more often than not very unhealthy. They're very toxic tools. And so we use things like stonewalling, the silent treatment. I mean, you can name a number of them. We nag, we manipulate, we defend, we compare, we criticize, on and on and on. And I've included, or we're going to include, a little booklet called The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, by the Gottman Institute. And there are four behaviors that we tend to use in our marriage that are very, very destructive. And so that'll be posted in the chat at some point, and you can print that out. It's a really amazing resource. So I'll leave you with that. And these are all, especially these four, it's contempt, criticism, stonewalling, and defensiveness. They're so toxic to our relationships, and it's all because we're trying to change the other person to match exactly what we want in a partner. So let's go to the top, or sorry, not the top, the bottom of page 4, dealing with differences. We want to be able to understand and appreciate the differences. So let's just talk about understanding for a second. So when we're trying to deal with our spouse's differences, and maybe how irritating they could be at times, ask the question, or ask them open-ended questions. Ask them, come from a stance of curiosity. Help me understand why you do that. Tell me what you're feeling when you do that, or when you say that. Those are open-ended questions that seek to understand rather than judge or criticize. So it's really important that you do that. Don't ask, what's wrong with you? Why do you do that all the time? Or why you always or never, and you know, those kinds of things that it would probably create defensiveness, one of the four horsemen. So the conversation that you started in the last Your Turn exercise about your background and culture, I highly recommend that you have longer conversation about that, because I bet you'll start to understand why your partner is the way that they are, right? We really want to understand them. Another really good question to ask if you really want to understand your spouse is, what is it like for you growing up? What was it like for you growing up? What was your relationship like with your caregivers? Did it feel safe to go to them when you needed comfort? You know, this line of questioning gets to the heart of what we call childhood attachment. See, my husband is a middle child of 3. By the way, middle children are the best, make the best spouses. I heard that in somewhere. I think it was some authored the birth order book or whatever, right? Someone's going, yay. And I'm the youngest of 3. So we're different there. He grew up in a flexible environment, and I grew up within a very strict and rigid parenting style. We came into our relationship with a lot of differences and definitely a different attachment style. So it's really important to understand, seek to understand where your partner is coming from. I also, I'm going to attach an attachment questionnaire, add an attachment questionnaire, another resource that asks some simple questions about your upbringing, your childhood, how you attach to your caregivers. When you start to talk to your spouse about your differences, you will inevitably realize how much of who you are is rooted in the way you were raised and attached to your caregivers. So have those conversations with your partner and ask your partner these very good questions that you'll see on that resource, so you can grow to understand one another and these differences. The second thing is to learn to appreciate. Try to appreciate those differences. God created us different, right? For a reason. There seems to be some kind of a greater purpose in us being so different, and yet, you know, we're different, but yet we come together, right? So that's also true about the church, for example. We're different and we've come together. So there's a purpose there. There's a scripture in your workbook about how the church is built up with what every part supplies, and this is true in your marriage as well. Your marriage is stronger if each of you will bring what God has created you to bring, your gifts, your talents, and when you both bring all of that into your marriage, you're going to be better together, and appreciate, that, wow, we really are better together. It's not, we're not the same, but we're just better together, right? So we're just going to skip one a video that I was going to just in the interest of time. So we're just going to go skip right over that. Um, Canadian statistics. The first hump in divorce seems to appear somewhere around year 4. And the primary cause of that, people, most cite is irreconcilable differences, right? You've heard that, or unresolved conflict related to their differences. The second kind of hump comes around year 20 to 25. And that is mostly primarily connected to drift. So losing touch, uncoupling, as they say. Couples say that they've drifted out of love, or they've lost that loving feeling, the song, na, 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 my feeling. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so let's talk about drift for just a minute. And I think we are going to be out of time shortly, so I'll go very quickly through that. So if you take a water, like a, what do you call those? Like a drift bottle, and you throw a bunch of drift bottles in the same place in the ocean, where do you think they're going to end up? Probably, most likely in very different directions, right? So similarly with so it's the currents, right? The currents are going to take these bottles into different directions. It'll take them apart. So it's like, this is kind of like a good marriage analogy. We don't drift towards each other. We actually drift apart. It takes intention to stay together, but without that, we just naturally drift. So currents occur that take us in different directions. And one of them is cultural currents. So if you look at the top of page 5 under drift, the first one is cultural currents. And that again is, we mentioned it earlier, is about that negative, pessimistic kind of view. If you ask a young person these days about what they think about marriage, you probably will get a negative response, right? I see many young adults in my practice, and they're struggling with this. They don't trust in the covenant of marriage. They think that most marriages will fail. Young people are desperately affected by the myths against marriage in our culture. There's this idea that 50 or sometimes even 70% of marriages fail, but the truth is that in Canada, especially, it's only really about 30%. I mean, it would be nice if it was lower, but it really is not 70%. And so we want to be very mindful of that. Um, we also know that in intact, if you came from an intact home, or let's say if a man from an intact home marries a woman from an intact home, so you both from an intact home, and this is Gottman marriage research, their divorce rate is only 9%, right? So that's 91% of marriages where partners come from intact homes um, can go the distance. They work. So there's a lot of hope, and we want to be able to go beyond those cultural currents and then talk to even to our kids about that, because they're probably thinking that 50 or 70% of marriages um, fail, and statistics are just statistics, right? When you get down to it, you know, what we really need to be concerned about is what we are going to do about our marriage, what tools we're going to implement, and how we're going to model that for our community, for our kids, for in our church. So those are cultural currents. And then there's these external things that happen that affect us. We're talking about the economy, the job loss or illness, stuff that happens in our extended family that has impact on us. And I have a whining dog that wants to be fed because she's a clock and she always gets fed at 6 o'clock. And she's giving me a warning at 5:36. Anyway, so, oh my goodness. So she might have to go into her room. Okay, so one of the most important ones that I really have to tell you about today is busyness, right? So this is one of the symptoms of, so this is one of the, one of the symptoms of busyness is that we stop. Okay. In the room she goes. Excuse me. Lily, in your
Give
room.
her a cookie, Isabel.
Yeah. Lily, go. Get out. Get out. You're not allowed to be in this room in marriage therapy.
Go on, Lily.
Marriage workshop. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Sorry about that.
Or Lily.
Put Lily on mute.
Thanks for that suggestion. She doesn't get it. So we get distracted with busyness, right? It's one of the primary factors for drift. Okay. There's a really good book called The Time-Starved Marriage. If you pick it up, you won't be sorry. It's a great book. It really, we really need to understand that if we, we're busy, and a lot of times we're busy with really, really good things. We're busy with our kids, raising our kids. We're busy with work, active in the church, extracurricular activities, outreach, charity. Those are all really good things, but we lose each other in the midst of that. And so many couples find themselves in a terrible, terrible season because of business and distorted priorities. So I've also included kind of a little worksheet that helps you to kind of balance what you're doing right now and what you want to be doing so that you can figure out what those priorities are. So hopefully you can make a good use of that resource. I've also included something called 6 Hours to a Better Relationship. It's a Gottman Institute resource. And it really kind of gives you a good idea about how much time minimum, right, we should be dedicating to our partner, not to our family, but to our partner. And Gottman says that even if we have little children, especially if we have little children, we should be carving out time just for our spouse to build intimacy, to build a bond, to build closeness and connection. And then finally, there are internal currents. And these are things, there's scripts that go off on our heads, that emotions that drive our behavior. These currents are common to everybody, right? So there's one of them is selfishness and brokenness, right? We are born this way. We're not born altruistic. We are born selfish. Think about babies. They're pretty selfish, right? Teenagers, they're really selfish. So or maybe we shouldn't say selfish. Maybe we should say maybe self-focused or self-centered, right? Maybe that's a better word. And let me tell you, as adults, we tend not to grow out of it, right? And so we're a little bit broken, or maybe a lot broken, and life has handed down some really tough things for many of us. These internal currents can also include things that we've experienced, traumas that we've experienced. So childhood or otherwise, and trauma therapy is a huge deal now, because I would say 3 out of 4 people will come in, and when we dig down deep, there has been some kind of trauma in their past. And so we really want to be aware of all of that, where that's coming from, and seek healing for ourselves, whether it's self-help or whether it's getting help from someone or having a mentor. Really important to deal with those things so that they don't creep up in our marriage, right? So we are going to skip over to let's see, where can we go? I think what we're going to do now is just looking at where we can jump to in the interest of time. Just bear with me for a sec. Okay. All right. So we've talked about the internal currents. Also, oops, I didn't go forward here. We talked about cultural external. This is that resource that I talked about a moment ago. And we want to be able to control the currents that we can. There are things that we can do, and I mentioned this before, is finding people that you trust, finding therapists that can help you work throughout some of these things, and then staying the course, right? Staying the course means that the best way to have a good marriage is to actually stay in it, right? A way of dealing with drift is not to leave, is to stay the course. And it sounds, and I want to just have a little caveat here, because it's really important. I'm not talking about abusive relationships. I'm not saying that you should stay the course in a situation where there is emotional and physical abuse. There, you need very intensive therapy and or separation. So, so I want to clarify that. And then keep your eye on the destination, right? Keep your eye on where you want to go. Have a vision for your marriage. I think that we did that some time ago in one of our other marriage seminars, is coming up with a vision for a marriage, right? What do we want it to look like? Where do we want it to go? What legacy do we want to leave for our children? So the very last thing is I'd like you to turn to page 6 and look at those pictures. if you have them. I might have it on my screen. I think I do. So look at these pictures. Choose an image that best captures what you would like your marriage to be in 20 years. Share with your partner your reasons for choosing that image. So we'll give you 2 minutes to do that. So a minute each. And then we will just take some questions if there are, or some comments, anything that you'd like to share right after that. Okay. That always scares me. Okay, so yeah, so if there's any, Amanda, I don't know if there's anything that came up.
We're going to stop the recording now, Alan.